Hey everyone, welcome back. Welcome back to your award-winning Letters and Layers podcast, where we talk all things mental health, wellness, books, streams of consciousness, motherhood, life transitions, and everything in between. This is your host, yours truly, Amaka. It is Friday, June 13th, I believe. No, Friday, June 12th. It is Friday, June 12th in the 6 o'clock hour, almost 7 a.m. I set an alarm last night and then I woke up and it was 6:45. I was like, what's going on? Turns out I set my alarm for 6:15 p.m. So I'm just thankful that I still woke up at a decently early time so that I could record this episode. If you listen to the last episode or maybe like a couple within the Postpartum Diaries series, I've mentioned that my husband and I take shifts with the baby. So he is usually with the baby between like 11 p.m. and like 7:30 a.m., 8-ish. And then I'm with the baby for pretty much the whole day. Things are changing a little bit starting this weekend because our little one got his 8-week vaccinations on Wednesday of this week. So I'm excited because we've been pretty cautious not to be out with him around people, essentially because his immune system was still super immature and still is, but slowly building up now that he's gotten pretty major vaccinations in the schedule. So, and just in time too, because my mom and sister are coming into town tonight, and they'll be here for a couple of days. So I'm super excited about that. They are yet to meet him, and they live in Texas. So being that we wanted to wait until he got the vaccinations to have family and friends, I'm super excited to finally have my mom meet her grandson and my sister meet her nephew. And then we have more family coming in to town next week, my husband's family, my in-laws, because we have a lot of family festivities. My husband is graduating from residency, which is so amazing. So many emotions, because this whole being a partner of a medical student / resident, if you know, like, it is not for the weak. So getting to this point where he is pretty much done, he will have some time to make up since he's on paternity leave, but thankfully he is able to still participate in graduation festivities and will make up what he has outstanding later this summer into the fall, and then he's finished. So super excited, super happy, very excited to see my family, very excited to venture out for the summer with him. So much going on in Chicago during the summer. A lot of kid-friendly things, although he's a baby. He's 2 months. But he is being a lot more just inquisitive and curious. Always wants to stand. He wants you to hold him and stand him up. Sometimes if you don't, he'll cry. And his eyes are big, and he just wants to soak in everything around him that he can see. So I know he's going to get so much stimulation this summer, and, I'm excited for him. I'm sure it'll help with just general growth and development, just moving around the city, being around people, hearing new noises, new sensations, everything. So I'm just very excited. And at some points it felt like this 2-month period just wouldn't end, But I think my husband and I are happy that we made the decision that we did. I think it helps a lot with just the initial bonding stages with the baby, and, taking extra precautions to make sure he remains safe and healthy while he's getting used to the world. And now he's no longer a newborn. He is officially an infant and is looking like one, a very mature infant for 2 months. Because with his vaccinations, he, just had a wellness check at his appointment, and he is definitely high on the percentile and, growing like a weed. So I'm just super thankful to God and just happy with how things are going. So I wasn't going to talk about this topic today. I initially had it planned like early in like May. I kind of had a mental timeline of the topics I was going to speak about. And as time progressed, my feelings around this topic became pretty complicated. And there was a point where I decided I wasn't going to talk about this journey for me. And I had something else I could have talked about that wouldn't have been so emotionally sensitive for me. But I think a couple days ago, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. It won't be the easiest. But what made me decide affirmatively was I was like, you know what? The audience of this podcast is still on the smaller side. And for however long, who knows, it's irrelevant. But if there's one person who listens to this episode and is able to process their emotions around this experience in a better way, or feels less alone, or a lot less judged, or feels empowered to make the decision that they need to, regardless of whatever pressures or feelings that they may have, then it's worth doing. So that's what ultimately helped me kind of like change my mind around it, because it is not easy to speak about, but I don't think I will regret it. I think I was deciding not to do it from a very emotional place, and that's very valid. Like if I still didn't feel like I wanted to talk about it, I wouldn't. But pushing past that and thinking what impact it could potentially have to any listener who's meant to hear it made me decide, okay, we're going to do it regardless. So, like I said, my son is 2 months now, and within the next couple of weeks, he'll probably be on formula exclusively. That was not the plan. Being pregnant, I just automatically assumed that I would breastfeed, and I would breastfeed for a while. My goal was going to be 12 months to breastfeed him. But things don't always go as planned. As you can, if you listen to my, labor and delivery story, at the end of the day, like I had the outcome I wanted as far as how I had him. But getting there, like once I got to the hospital, getting there was a little bit shaky. So things don't always go as planned, and things didn't go the way I thought they would go as far as this feeding journey for my son. After he was born, he was in the NICU for 3 days, which I talked about in the other postpartum episodes. So, I didn't have skin to skin with him. He was on my chest for not even 10 seconds. And because of the meconium aspiration concern, they took him pretty much right away, put him in the baby assessment. Like they took him to the baby station, assessed him, put him in the warmer, like the portable, the NICU bed, the one on wheels that you can take to the NICU unit. So I did not have skin to skin with him. I wish I had, I was hoping to have like golden hour and just get those processes going as far as transitioning the body from the state of pregnancy to the state of postpartum, especially after having birthed the placenta and hormones adjusting and, starting to produce milk. So he was in the NICU for 3 days. While I was in the hospital, I was pumping colostrum. I pumped initially because after the lactation consultant came to see me and kind of educate me on how to go about things, I was pumping with a hospital grade pump initially, but I did not like how it felt, particularly the nipple area. It just felt like it was, even though she measured, the nipples, it just did not feel good. Come to find out, those pumping phalanges were too small for me, even though, she measured it, but still they were too small. So, I didn't know then. So I was pumping, but at a point I stopped and I started hand expressing, and I had more success with that. Since my mature milk hadn't come in at that point, I was just pumping colostrum. So, and for folks who may not be privy, colostrum is essentially the first milk that comes out before your mature milk comes into the breasts at around 2 to 3 days postpartum. Sometimes it takes a little longer depending. So colostrum is thicker. It is less, it's just less in quantity, essentially, because the baby is still super new and is not at the point where it needs that mature milk yet. It can kind of sustain itself on the colostrum, ideally. So I was hand expressing the colostrum, and the little bit of millimeters or milliliters that I would get of colostrum, I would take it to the NICU. They would kind of take a syringe and use it to administer the colostrum to my son. So, I did that essentially for like the first 36 hours because he was on dextrose, which was being administered to him through a tube. But because, thank God, he was progressing so quickly, he was progressing very well, very quickly. They took him off the dextrose and, he needed sustenance. Particularly more so because he was in the NICU and he needed additional support. So I ultimately decided, my husband and I ultimately decided that we would start him on formula while I was still pumping colostrum, so we were giving him both. Obviously he was getting more formula because they were in like 50 milliliter bottles, and he would probably, when he first started the formula, he would take like 20 milliliters, and then it progressed to 30 and 40, so on and so forth. So we decided on that, and I wasn't really worried at that time that I wouldn't breastfeed him, because before we started formula, the next night after the birth, this was maybe, let's say like 20 hours later, there was the first time that I got to hold him because he had been in the baby NICU station till that point. So they were okay with me, kind of positioning him to see if he would latch. And he actually did. He latched, and he had a strong latch. But because of the situation, we couldn't depend on me essentially. I guess what I'm trying to say, if he was not a NICU baby, him latching and, us kind of starting would not have been a big deal. But because he was a NICU baby, because he had now this history, and he, they were watching him and him needing to, one of the stipulations with him being discharged was his ability to feed. And, you know, it being a hospital, they needed to be able to measure his ability to feed. And they wouldn't be able to measure his ability to feed, you know, by me giving him breast milk. I guess they could like weigh him initially, me do it, and then weigh him again. But priority, because of the initial challenges, was to make sure he fed and fed well. So what I was producing at that point was, I don't want to use the word insufficient, but that's the word that's coming to me, so I'm just going to use it. It doesn't say anything about me specifically. Just like essentially it being a numbers game with how many milliliters he was taking in. So, you know, when the time came to make a decision, because they had taken the dextrose, you know, they had discontinued the dextrose order because he didn't need it anymore. I was like, okay, we both decided to start him on formula. I thought that, you know, he would be on formula while he was in the hospital, and, you know, I'd be pumping or hand expressing essentially at that point. And then as soon as we got home, we would start the breastfeeding journey. Like, we would start the latching and everything. So that was the plan. That was what I was trying to execute when we got home. But, you know, since he had been on the formula for the last, let me say 36 hours, because he was essentially in the NICU for about 72 hours. And I would say about the halfway mark, he stopped the dextrose, and we started the formula. So at that point, he was used to the nipple enough of the bottle. And from birth, honestly, from when we started the formula, the NICU nurses would tell me, you know, he's a pretty fast eater. Like, we have to kind of pace him and everything. So, and he still kind of shows that characteristic now. So we were still giving him the formula, and I was starting to familiarize myself with my pumping machine. I had 2 pumps. I had a pump that was kind of connected to a little motor, a Lastino pump, and then I had a wearable pump, a Mom Cozy. So I figured out how to get things going first with the Lastino pump. And, you know, slowly but surely, I was expressing milk, which was exciting for me. I even feel like I remembered the point where that night where I transitioned from colostrum to full milk, I kind of feel like I felt it in my chest. And then the next day I started to pump, and there was milk coming out, which was wild to see. Because sometimes you're like, will this happen for me? And, you know, it did. So while pumping and giving him the bottled milk, we continued the brand of formula in the same packaging that was in the hospital. We bought it and brought it home. So he was still on that while I was building my breast milk volume. So we were giving him that. We were giving him my pumped milk. And I was still trying to get him to latch to me. But the thing was, you know, he wouldn't always latch. Like, he would latch sometimes. You know, one moment he would kind of almost do it like it was natural for him. And then maybe the next time I tried to latch him, he would kind of just behave like he didn't want it. So it really depended, I think, because since he was such a fast eater with the milk in the hospital, the nurses had to pace him. I think he was frustrated about needing to work harder now to extract milk from the breast, since it was so easy to extract the milk from the bottle. So I was kind of struggling with that emotionally. I talked to my mom about it. She gave me a lot of encouragement. I kept trying. This was, in the first week, I would say within the first 7 days. So any time that I could, I would put him on the breast to latch, and, he would, but he was not consistent, and with the success that I was getting from pumping at the time, and him essentially getting half breast milk, half formula, initially, I was like, okay, maybe I just focus on pumping. So he was probably getting latched 1 to 2 times a day, which is recommended that you latch him literally as often as possible, multiple times a day. So it wasn't nearly enough. But I was concerned first and foremost about just him getting sustenance, whether it was pumped milk, whether it was formula. I just wanted to make sure he was eating and he was not frustrated from lack of food. So it got to a point where, I honestly, at this point, I can't remember the last time I put him on the breast. He's 2 months now. It must have been maybe like at the 4-week, 5-week mark. It's been a while. And like I said, I guess it depended on his mood. You know what? I would often put him on the breast after he had eaten his main meal, because I didn't want him to be frustrated. So I struggled with the timing of putting him on my breast, because if I put him on when I knew he was hungry, he was especially upset and frustrated because he wanted to eat. He was super hungry. He wanted milk. So, I would try to do that. I tried several times to put him on the breast right after he woke up from like his long day nap. But just his discontent and just wanting to eat, and me not wanting him to cry so long out of hunger, I would give him either the pumped milk or the formula. So, it got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to try as hard to get him to latch. And because he was growing and meeting all his milestones, at that point, putting him on the breast was just becoming something that came to my mind less and less. I kind of fell into the habit of giving him the formula or giving him the pumped milk. And initially he was getting like both, like at a 1-to-1 ratio. He was, because he was still super small. So I could keep up with the 1-to-1 ratio of breast milk and formula. But once he started hitting his growth spurts at like 6 weeks, 3 weeks initially, and then like the 6-week mark, the ratio was getting smaller as far as the breast milk is concerned. He was probably getting, out of his daily food intake, he was probably getting 40% of it being formula, 40% of it being breast milk. And, I was pumping 3 times a day for 45 minutes. Initially, I was pumping 4 times a day, anywhere for 30 to 40 minutes. But I eventually dropped down to 3 times a day, because I just felt like I wasn't getting enough milk to give him if I was pumping for 15 or 20 minutes. But I would get more milk if I stayed on the pump for longer. So I would pump first thing in the morning. Like, I had my pump parts next to my bed. I would wake up and get going. And then I would pump midday when he was down for his like second nap. and I would pump before I went to bed when I was at the 3 times a day point. Yeah, so I pumped for 3 times a day for a few weeks, even though, lactation consultants and just people in that field will tell you if you're pumping and you want him to exclusively be on breast milk, you have to pump for like 8 times a day, 8 to 10 times a day is what they tell you, for 15 to 20 minutes. I wasn't going to do that. I didn't see how I could do that. And that includes overnights. So I never pumped overnight. And me being on Reddit and everything, they're like, middle of the night pump is the most important because of hormone levels and everything. That may be true. But my sleep was more important to me. I knew that I wouldn't be as present or appreciate my time with the baby during the day if I did not get adequate sleep at night. So I never pumped in the middle of the night. And maybe that impacted me negatively. I'll never know. But yeah. So instead of doing those 8 to 10 pumps a day, I decided I was going to initially, like I said, pump 4 times a day for 30 to 40 minutes. And then I switched to 3 times a day for 40 to 45 minutes. Sometimes I'd go over up to an hour. I tried wearable pumps so that I could pump more often, but I was getting less milk with the wearable pumps. So I used the Mom Cozy maybe 10 times, probably less than that, while I was trying it out. But I was probably getting half of my output with the wearable pump compared to my output with the more standard pump. So I kind of relegated the wearable pump to the closet not long after, probably about after like 2 weeks of using it, and just kind of accepted my fate that I would not really be so mobile or be able to do other things with a wearable pump because I didn't get as much milk and I needed to get as much as possible. And who knows, like maybe if I had continued to try other wearable pumps, maybe I would have figured it out. But those things can be expensive and I wasn't trying to shell out more money. I had actually bought another wearable pump, because it said that one of its marketing claims, which admittedly I fell for, was that its ability to generate heat because of how it was created would help with letdown. And I knew that helped me because I would have kind of a warm compress on my chest while I was pumping. And I'm sure that helped with the output. So I was like, oh, if I don't have to put a warm compress while I'm pumping, if the wearable pump kind of takes that on, then I will give it a try. So I spent the Mom Cozy was a registry gift. I spent like $300+ on this other wearable pump that I only used like twice. And unfortunately, because it was considered like medical grade, like I couldn't return it. So just complete transparency there. And I think that purchase was definitely an emotional one, because I was trying to figure out a way to, this was before essentially I had accepted that, I just have to use the standard pump. I might just have to be sitting like a duck and express this milk. I might not be able to move around. I'll just try and make it work for me. If I'm pumping on my bed, I'll have the TV on so that, my mind is occupied, or, just be on my laptop or whatever, or read, what have you. I just kind of came to terms with the fact that I would not be able to move around or multitask, I guess, in the way that I like to if I was pumping milk. So I hadn't come to terms at that point where I bought the $300 pump. But shortly after, I was like, this $300 pump is not getting the milk I need. So I decided, okay, I'm just gonna do what I need to do for my baby. I get the most milk from the standard pump, even though it takes a lot more energy and mental friction to get it, how it needs to be on my breasts. And I kind of just need to sit down and do it. I can't move around the way I like. So yeah, I just continued on with the standard pump, and I was doing it 3 times a day. And then there was a Saturday that my husband and I decided to do a lunch date, just the two of us, at this local cafe that did not have a lot of people. So we took the baby in the stroller. It's literally around the corner from our home. So we went in, we sat in a corner and ordered food, and we went during the time where I usually do my midday pump. And I just remember I was nervous about missing the midday pump because I didn't want my supply to go down, because the whole breast milk situation, whether you're pumping or you're putting the baby to the breast, the less often you do it, the less milk you get, because it's signaling the body that you don't need as much. But the more you pump or the more you breastfeed, the more milk you're supposed to produce, because you're signaling to your body that you need more, so it makes more. I was nervous that I didn't pump in the afternoon that day, but I was also kind of like, oh, this is nice, just pumping in the morning and then pumping in the evening. So I didn't do it. And then from then on, I kind of just decided, because of how much more I enjoyed my day, that I would do morning and evening. So admittedly, there was a trade-off. I went from pumping first thing in the morning and then in the evening to, with that, my supply going down. So I pumped 2 times a day for a couple weeks. And honestly, I kept going because I wanted to provide this for my baby. I was attaching significance and meaning of who I was as a mother to my ability to produce breast milk, essentially. And that's why, and that's part of the messaging that you get, and that is part of the pressure of giving birth and becoming a new mom. A lot of people were asking me, what are you planning on doing? And I would say breastfeeding. And I didn't really, for the most part, consider any other option. But because of our experience with how he got here and what happened, he started formula feeding with breast milk. And essentially the 2 pumps a day went down to 1 pump a day, because even though I felt guilty about him getting breast milk, I felt better about not worrying so much about pumping and feeding. On top of pumping, I'm feeding him the pumped milk, like it was like double duty. So I wanted to get to the 3-month mark to at least get him to 90 days with breast milk. But honestly, it got to a point. Today is Friday. I was getting ready to pump last Monday, so 4 days ago. And I could not put the pump to my breasts. I was just done. And I was emotional about it. I cried about it because I wanted to keep going. And I struggled with what it said about me. But I just had to tell myself that him not getting breast milk does not mean I have failed as a mom, because I struggled with feelings of failure. But I had to tell myself him not getting breast milk does not mean, or him not getting breast milk anymore, does not mean I have failed as a mother. It does not mean he is struggling at all. He's actually doing very, very well, like remarkably well. It doesn't mean anything negative about me as a new parent, as a mom, as a caregiver, as a mom who has a son. It doesn't mean anything about me specifically. And I was trying to tell myself that from a logical place, but emotionally I was struggling a lot and still am. But at the same time, I feel like I enjoy my time with him more. I appreciate my time with him more. I was starting to resent the pumping. I did not want to do it. And I know that, there are things in life that you have to do regardless of how you feel. But it got to a point just for me where it was eroding the quality of my mental health. And I was like, that's what ultimately made me decide to stop. Because I could deal with the physical discomfort of pumping, but when that physical discomfort is starting to affect you mentally, and when you feel like you're not able to rise to the occasion in the way that you can for yourself and for your son, I was like, you know what? I think my journey in this regard has come to an end. So I haven't pumped since Monday, and it'll probably take a while for my breast milk output to kind of stop completely. Also, too, honestly, like since I had gone from the beginning, since I had gone from 4 pumps a day to 3 pumps a day, and then 3 pumps to 2 pumps, and then 2 pumps to 1 pump, I was slowly watching my supply go down. Even though I had more time during the day for myself and for my baby, I was slowly watching it dwindle, and kind of finishing 40 minutes of pumping and only getting like 2 ounces at a point did not help with how I felt. So that was part of the reason why it was like, I think pumping will be a thing of the past for me at this point. So I had quite a bit of breast milk in the fridge. We've been slowly making our way through it, and I have like 7 bags of frozen breast milk. So he will probably still be combo fed until the end of next week, and at that point he will be exclusively formula fed. And I think honestly I will struggle at that point too, because part of me still takes comfort in the fact that he still gets breast milk. It's not, even if it's like 2 ounces a day of breast milk, he still gets it. But I think I'm going to have to actively process how I feel when the breast milk is completely done, and continue. It's going to be a daily thing to keep reminding myself that him getting only formula is not an indictment on me as a mother. What matters as a mother is being there for him, meeting his needs, promoting the bond and secure attachment that I want us to have, him feeling safe, him getting the support he needs on a daily basis as a newborn and now as an infant. I wish people and society would no longer shame women for the decisions that they make as new moms. I wish that people and society in general would no longer attach value so much on the decisions that women make in this regard. He is growing. He is big for his age. He is meeting all his milestones. He is growing and blossoming into a super cool little baby. He is doing everything he's supposed to be doing at the age that he's at. I think I also take comfort in the fact that he's gotten his vaccinations, or a large chunk of them at this point. And part of the reason why I wanted to hold on for as long as I could was so he could get the antibodies from the breast milk. So because we've gotten to this point, I feel a little bit better about discontinuing this pumping journey. But all in all, honestly, this is something I'm probably just going to have to continually process for a while. But at the end of the day, I feel like I can enjoy the days better. I feel like I can pay the most attention to him. I'm not feeling any resentment towards having to pump. And I continue to remind myself that things are different because our journey started in a different way. You know, maybe I would have been able to exclusively breastfeed if he did not go to the NICU for 3 days. I'll never know. But in moments where I really struggle, I just try to remind myself that my circumstances are unique. They are. I found myself comparing myself to my friends who, you know, were able to get that process going for themselves. But then I have to continually remind myself that my case is unique. And, you know, the cascade of events after the fact is what made it so that we had to make these decisions. And pumping is a lot of work. Pumping on top of feeding your baby is a lot of work. So I'm just trying to, you know, keep that in mind, remind myself of that, remind myself that he is a perfect, you know, he's doing perfectly and he will continue to do great. And if this is how things worked out, it doesn't mean I'm a bad mom. It doesn't mean I'm any less of a mom. It doesn't mean that he is worse off. It doesn't mean that. So I'm just trying to actively manage and process these thoughts and reframe, constant reframing until I no longer feel so emotionally impacted. And also too, I'm trying to remind myself that he's not going to be drinking milk forever. He's 2 months and he's going to start solids by the fall, like October, November. And this will be behind me. A year from now, he'll be 14 months and he'll probably be eating regular food. And are you able to tell who was on breast milk versus formula? You know, in adolescence and, you know, in adulthood? No. So I want to encourage any moms who happen to be listening to this episode, any new moms where the breastfeeding journey did not turn out how you hoped. It doesn't mean you are any less of a mother. It doesn't mean that you do not love your child. It doesn't mean that he or she as a baby is going to be worse off. I would say, as someone who's been in the newborn trenches and is figuring out this motherhood thing and has been in it for the past 2 months, my advice is do what you can as long as your mental health is not negatively affected. And ultimately, the decision to stop for me was to preserve the quality of my mental health. And I think I also take comfort in the fact that since he's growing so well and he is vaccinated, you know, he is where he's supposed to be with vaccinations as a 2-month-old. That's why I feel better. But even if that was not the case, If I could not produce breast milk at all and had to formula feed from jump, if you're a mom that wanted to breastfeed but could not and had to start formula from the beginning, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If you are a mom who just did not want to breastfeed, who planned on formula feeding your baby from the beginning, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You're not less of a mom because of those decisions. You don't love your baby less because of those decisions. And this might not be a message that we get as often as we should, but I want to be the one to tell any mom out there who is in the position of receiving it that this is what is true. So I'm going to end the podcast here. I am at the 52-minute mark of recording, and considering that I have a kid, I'm probably going to have to take moments here and there to edit so I can publish on time. But I hope anyone who listened to this podcast and made it to the end, I hope that my journey is something that you can remember for yourself or use as support and comfort, regardless of the decisions that you make as a new mom. And just know that there are people out there that support you no matter what decision that you make. So thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you all. Feel free to reach out to me, contact@thelettersandlayers.com, DM me at the Letters and Layers pod, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.